It was supposed to be the start of a quiet, peaceful life. I'd just moved into my dream ranch, wide open land, fresh air, and finally, some space to breathe. But just as I was unloading the last box, I saw her. She stood at the edge of my property, arms crossed, phone in hand. I didn't know her name yet, but I'd come to hear it over and over again. Karen. She wasn't just any nosy neighbor. She was the president of the local HOA. And from the look on her face, I was all ready. Her latest problem? She didn't waste any time. Within hours of my arrival, 2 patrol cars rolled up. Turns out, she'd called the cops, claiming I was trespassing. Apparently, she didn't think someone like me could afford a place like this, or belong here at all. The officers quickly realized there was no issue, but Karen wasn't done. She hovered around all week, making comments, snapping photos, digging for something she could use to run me out. But what she didn't know, what made her jaw hit the floor days later, was who I really am. And the moment she found out, everything changed. Her attitude, her tone, her entire plan crumbled. One minute she was barking orders, the next she was backpedaling so hard she could have tripped. And trust me, you'll want to stick around to hear exactly what happened when the truth came out. A few days before all this happened, I'd been wrapping up my old life in the city, packing boxes, saying goodbye to long commutes and noisy neighbors. I'd worked hard for this ranch, saved every dollar, made sacrifices. This wasn't just a new house for me. It was a fresh start, a place where I could finally breathe and enjoy what I'd built. So, when I arrived and was instantly treated like I didn't belong, it hit harder than I expected. Karen didn't even try to hide her disapproval. She marched over that first evening, clipboard in hand, asking if I had permission to paint my fence or park my truck where I did. Mind you, I hadn't even had a chance to unload everything yet. She started quoting HOA rules I hadn't even seen, claiming my horse trailer was bringing down the property value and that livestock wasn't allowed, even though this was clearly zoned ranch land. Something felt off. It wasn't about the rules. It was personal. Neighbors started giving me strange looks too, like they'd already heard a story about me, a version that wasn't even close to the truth. Someone had clearly been talking. Every move I made, I could feel eyes on me. But I kept calm, stayed polite, and didn't give her the fight she seemed to want. Meanwhile, I was gathering my own information, waiting for the right moment to reveal exactly who she was dealing with, and that moment, it was coming soon. The longer I stayed, the clearer it became. Karen wasn't just a neighbor with a bad attitude. She was used to controlling everything around here. Word was, she'd run off the last 2 families that tried to move in near her side of the neighborhood. She had the HOA wrapped around her finger, and she wasn't afraid to use it like a weapon. Every other day, I was getting little notices taped to my gate fines for unauthorized landscaping, complaints about non-compliant fencing, even an issue with the color of my barn. A barn. On a ranch, still, I kept to myself, didn't stir things up. But things escalated fast when Karen started involving other neighbors. Suddenly, a few folks I'd waved to during morning walks stopped responding. One guy even turned his sprinkler on when I walked past, like I was some kind of stray animal. It was clear Karen had started spinning a story, painting me as reckless, maybe even dangerous. But she had no idea what I actually did for a living or the connections I had. Then there was the fence issue. One morning, I found a section of it taken down. Clean cuts through the wood like it was done on purpose. My horses could have gotten out. That wasn't just annoying, it was dangerous. I didn't have proof, but I knew exactly who wanted to make my life harder. And at that point, I realized this wasn't just about HOA rules or neighborhood standards. This was personal land. It was far from over. By the 3rd week, things hit a boiling point. I was waking up to noise complaints filed at 6 a.m., despite not even starting my day until later. Karen had somehow convinced the HOA board to threaten legal action over things like my gravel driveway and a so-called unauthorized structure, which was just a shed that had been there before I even bought the place. Every day felt like a chess game. But she wasn't playing fair, she was trying to wear me down. I decided it was time to show up at one of the HOA meetings. I walked in and felt every eye on me. Karen was already seated at the front, acting like she ran the show. She didn't expect me to speak, let alone bring documents, permits, property records, and most importantly, zoning laws. I'd done my homework. But before I even opened my mouth, Karen tried to cut me off, saying only approved residents were allowed to speak. Her voice got loud, shaky. She was unraveling in real time, and everyone saw it. Then came the final straw. I caught someone snooping near my barn late one night. I didn't confront them, I just watched from the shadows and took note of the license plate. Guess whose car it was? That was when I decided enough was enough. I had stayed quiet out of respect, but Karen had pushed too far, and the time to stay silent had passed. What she didn't know was that everything she assumed about me was dead wrong, and she was about to find out. The night after I got the plate number, I made a few quiet calls. Not to stir drama, but to protect myself. That's when the second twist hit. Turns out Karen wasn't just bending HOA rules to mess with me. She was breaking some of her own. Through a friend in local zoning, I learned that Karen had built an illegal extension on her property years ago, right over a utility easement. She'd been hiding it with falsified paperwork and a handshake deal with a former board member who no longer lived in the neighborhood. Suddenly, her obsession with my property wasn't just about control, it was a distraction. Now I knew why she was so desperate to get me out. If the wrong person looked too closely at my ranch, they might look at hers too. She thought I was some clueless newcomer who'd eventually give up and move on. But she didn't know my background. I wasn't just a guy who bought land, I was a real estate and land use attorney. I'd spent years dealing with cases just like this. I'd stayed quiet, not because I didn't know the law, but because I wanted peace. Now, she'd forced my hand. And just when I thought I had a grip on the full picture, another envelope showed up at my gate. No return address, just my name scrawled in messy handwriting. Inside were photos, grainy shots of my property taken from different angles, different days. Someone else was watching me too. I held the envelope in my hands, heart pounding. The photos weren't just random, they were taken from different corners of the neighborhood. Someone had been keeping track of my every move. That's when I realized it wasn't just Karen. She had help. Probably someone from the HOA board, maybe even more than one. I took the envelope straight to a contact at the sheriff's office. The moment they saw the photos and heard the full story, they took it seriously. The next HOA meeting was the turning point. I walked in with a thick folder of legal documents, proof of zoning violations on Karen's property, the plate number tied to her car, and evidence that I was being surveilled. This time, I didn't wait to speak. I laid everything on the table in front of the board and calmly explained who I wasn't, what I knew. The silence in that room was deafening. Karen's face went pale. One of the board members got up and left. Before I even finished, that's when it all started to unravel. An emergency vote was called. Karen was removed from her position, and the board promised an investigation into the surveillance and harassment. But just when I thought the dust was settling, the twist hit. Later that night, another envelope showed up. No photos this time, just a single note. You weren't supposed to win. No name. No clue who sent it. Turns out, Karen might have just been the tip of something bigger. After that final note, I decided to install cameras around my ranch, not out of fear, but to finally put an end to the mystery. I wasn't going to let someone else control my peace. A few quiet weeks passed. No more notes, no more photos, and no more surprise inspections. Karen's house sat oddly quiet, her once constant presence now completely gone. Word around the neighborhood was that she'd packed up and moved to stay with a relative out of state. No one missed her. As for the HOA board, a few members resigned after the investigation began. Turns out there were multiple instances of favoritism, shady fines, and a pattern of pushing out certain homeowners who didn't fit the image. The county stepped in, and new leadership was brought in with clearer rules and real transparency. A few neighbors even came by to apologize, admitting they had been misled by Karen's stories. I finally got to enjoy the ranch the way I'd imagined early mornings with my horses. Quiet nights under the stars, and a sense of real freedom. The land felt different now, like it had been claimed for good. Looking back, the whole thing taught me something deeper. People will judge you based on what they think they know. But truth, patience, and standing your ground go a long way. And as for that final note, I still don't know who sent it. But one thing's for sure, if they ever come back, they'll know exactly who they're dealing with.